Human culture in Star Trek has changed so much over the centuries, yet there still exist many relics of art and inventions from modern times. Pop culture references appear in many different forms, from brief mentions in dialogue to background appearances and sometimes even important plot devices. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie with Trek Culture, here with 10 examples of real pop culture in Star Trek. Number 10. Rick and Morty. Rick and Morty has been the centre of a lot of controversy lately. With Justin Roiland, the voices of both Rick and Morty, being fired from the show for domestic abuse, the future of the show is uncertain. But if the second season of Star Trek Picard is to be believed, the show will do just fine without Roiland in 2024. In the episode Assimilation, right after Rios met Teresa's son Ricardo, Teresa told the boy in Spanish to finish his homework or else he couldn't watch Rick and Morty. Aside from the fact that Rick and Morty seems a bit mature for a 9-year-old kid, lots of folks online have pointed out how strange it is that the creator of Star Trek Lower Decks, Mike McMahon, now exists in Star Trek canon, given that he also worked on Rick and Morty as a writer, producer, story editor, and 4th season showrunner. Does this mean that the show Lower Decks also exists in Trek canon? It raises a lot of confusing questions, though the same questions could probably be raised for many of the entries on this list. Number 9. The Nintendo Switch. Video games, as we know them today, don't pop up in Star Trek that often, as most humans preferred to spend their time on holodecks during the 24th century, and things like recreation rooms and basic holographic tech were available at least a century before. Yet we've seen some older forms of media that still exist in Trek, like books, plays, and we've even seen characters like Tom Paris and the NX-01 crew watch television and films. It seems odd that classic video games are virtually absent from human society in the show. One of the only relics of the classic video game industry was a Nintendo Switch that appeared very briefly as part of Colonel Hawes' collection in the Lower Decks episode Keishon, His Eyes Open, along with dozens of other rare artifacts from real life and Star Trek history. You can see the console in a display case behind Beckett and Jet while they're fighting over the Keishon doll and trying to escape Hawes' automated defense systems. Video games have been referenced before in dialogue, and the Katarian headset from the Next Generation episode The Game could be seen as a form of video game. Still, it seems odd that we haven't seen more references to real-world video games or video game consoles in Trek. We'd love to see more stuff like the episode Lasting Impressions from the Orville, when the crew opened a time capsule from 2015 that contained a copy of Minecraft for the Xbox 360. Number 8. Fidget Spinners. In the same display case as the Nintendo Switch, you may have noticed another pop culture reference, just to the left of the console. Anyone who lived through 2017 will recognise the shape of fidget spinners, and remember the hugely popular craze that spread across the world that year. Fidget spinners seemingly came out of nowhere in 2017 and were gone from pop culture almost as fast. Yet, while they were popular, you couldn't visit any market, convenience store, or virtually any establishment without seeing a huge collection of fidget spinners on display, usually positioned strategically near the checkout counter. It's unclear why Colonel Hawes was so attached to the fidget spinner. Maybe it was an actual relic from 2017 Earth, since it's unlikely that a replicated spinner would be as impressive to him. The episode Keishon, His Eyes Open was absolutely packed with references to Trek, but the Switch and this fidget spinner were the best examples of modern pop culture items in his collection. Number 7. Movie Night. The crew of the NX-01 Enterprise held regular movie nights in the ship's mess hall. During these movie gatherings, several real-world films appeared. Most of the ones we saw were from the mid-20th century, but the ship's database had an extensive catalogue of over 50,000 films. In the episode Cogenitor, we see Trip look through a list of some of the films in their database, which included popular classics like The Day the Earth Stood Still, which also appeared in the beginning of the first episode of Strange New Worlds, but also films based off of holodeck programs we've seen throughout Trek. The film titled Dixon Hill and the Black Orchid referenced Captain Picard's Dixon Hill programs, and The Bride of Chaotica is from Tom Paris's Captain Proton programs. Members of the crew that often attended movie night included Trip, Archer, Mayweather, and Sato. While Phlox and T'Pol didn't enjoy the films as much as the human crew members, they still occasionally attended to better understand human interests. After watching the 1931 film Frankenstein, T'Pol compared the villagers' reactions to Frankenstein's monster to humanity's reaction when the Vulcans made first contact. She also made a recommendation to Ambassador Saval that any Vulcans newly arriving on Earth should be shown the film as preparation, much to Archer's dismay. Number 6. The Flux Capacitor. Technobabble is basically just made-up words that writers can use to explain sci-fi technology. Star Trek really loves to use technobabble in dialogue, but it's far from the only franchise to do so. Perhaps the most famous example of technobabble is the Flux Capacitor from Back to the Future, which somehow allowed Doc Brown to time travel. Star Trek made an homage to this famously ambiguous device in the Next Generation episode Hollow Pursuits, albeit accidentally. While trying to figure out why the anti-grav units failed, Wesley suggested that Lieutenant Barclay should check the flow capacitor. Later in the episode, Barclay complained about the incident to a hologram of Counselor Troy, saying, "I knew about the flux capacitor, but I didn't need to hear about it from some 17-year-old kid." Apparently, the term was accidentally changed from flow capacitor to flux capacitor by Dwight Schultz, but regardless, the inclusion of a flux capacitor into the Star Trek Technobabble dictionary is certainly welcome. Number 5. Mourn. Deep Space Nine wouldn't be the same without everyone's favourite Lurian barfly, Mourn. Mourn was one of Quark's best customers and can be seen at his bar in dozens of episodes. He was known for being a brilliant storyteller, a shoulder to cry on, and one of the most talkative creatures the crew had ever encountered. Throughout Deep Space Nine, many people aboard the station came to consider Mourn a close friend. You may not know that Mourn was actually based on the character Norm, who appeared at the bar in every episode of the television show Cheers. Both characters were heavy drinkers and the subjects of several running gags in their respective shows. Mourn's legacy lives on today through the numerous other Lurians we've seen in Star Trek Discovery. Mourn himself even returned to television in the Lower Decks episode Hear All, Trust Nothing. It's great to know that after everything that's changed on the station, Quark still has his most loyal customer by his side. Number 4. Dungeons & Dragons. Dungeons & Dragons, the hugely popular tabletop role-playing game, was referenced in a really fun way in the Lower Decks episode The Least Dangerous Game. In the episode, Mariner, Boimler, Tendi and Rutherford played a Klingon-themed role-playing game called Bat-Leths and Binooks, where the goal was to die with as much honour as possible. The gameplay shared many similarities with Dungeons & Dragons. The game had figurines, multiple expansion packs and even a 20-sided dice. Tendi saying to herself, "Come on, natural 20" was also a nice touch. The game also featured a screen with interactable simulations of famous Klingons like Martok and Gowron, who would basically act as the dungeon master of the game by telling the story and introducing obstacles for the players to overcome. The interactable Klingons on the screen also seemed to be a reference to Star Trek The Next Generation, A Klingon Challenge, which was an interactable VHS board game that featured a video of a Klingon named Kavok, who would explain the game to players as they tried to stop him from taking the Enterprise D to Kronos. Number 3. Star Wars. Now, interestingly, R2-D2 popped up briefly in both the 2009 Star Trek film and Star Trek Into Darkness. In the 2009 film, he can be seen through the Enterprise's view screen after they warped to Vulcan, and in Into Darkness, he got sucked into space along with several crew members when the Enterprise suffered a devastating hull breach. While these appearances were obviously just little Easter eggs that hardly anyone noticed, it's much more fun to take it overly seriously and pretend like this proves that R2-D2 travelled through a wormhole from a galaxy far, far away to be in these films. So there you have it, Star Wars is officially canon to Star Trek. And it's not just the alternate timeline either, because the Millennium Falcon can actually be seen during the battle with the Borg in Star Trek First Contact. All this time we've been arguing over whether Star Trek or Star Wars was better, but we failed to realise that they were in the same universe all along. Number 2. Doctor Who. Here at What Culture, we're huge fans of both Star Trek and Doctor Who, so we love when the two franchises reference each other. Doctor Who is a lot more direct with its references. Star Trek has actually been mentioned by name on multiple occasions, like when Joy asked if a member of the Silence was wearing a Star Trek mask in the episode The Impossible Astronaut. Trek, by comparison, has been a bit more discreet. This reference was removed from the Blu-ray remaster of The Next Generation, but in the original version of The Neutral Zone, the graphic of Claire Raymond's family history included several names of actors who have played the Doctor. William Hartnell, Patrick Troughton, John Pertwee, Tom Baker, Peter Davison, which was spelt incorrectly by the way, and Colin Baker. They all appeared as part of the family tree. Also, in The Naked Now, Riker asked for a sonic driver to open a force field, which seems to be a clear reference to the Doctor's sonic screwdriver. The Doctor has encountered the Federation in comic books, but we would love to see this happen on screen. Both franchises have already shown that interdimensional travel is possible, so maybe we'll get a full crossover episode one day, but it's probably a pipe dream. But I will take this opportunity to direct you towards our sister channel Who Culture if Doctor Who is also something that you are interested in. Number 1. Shakespeare. It's well known that Picard was a massive Shakespeare fan. When Q visited the Cerritos in the Lower Decks episode Veritas, he even complained about Picard, saying that he's no fun, he's always quoting Shakespeare, he's always making wine. Q wasn't wrong. In the very first Next Generation episode Encounter at Farpoint, he quoted Kill All the Lawyers line from Henry VI Part 2. Then, in the episode Menage à Troy, he recited several lines from Shakespeare's sonnets and Othello in order to save Lwaxana Troy from Damon Togg. This habit continued into Star Trek Picard, with Jean-Luc quoting "No legacy is as rich as honesty, from all's well that ends well to his dog number 1. We can see in the Next Generation episode Hyde and Q that Picard kept a copy of Shakespeare's complete works in his ready room, and the Enterprise D often held live performances of Shakespearean plays, so it's safe to say that the playwright was a major inspiration to the Captain. And that concludes our list. If you think we missed any, then please do let us know in the comments below, and while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe, and tap that notification bell so you never miss a Trek Culture video ever again. Also head over to Twitter and Instagram and follow us over there as well, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with Trek Culture. I hope you have a wonderful day, and remember, to boldly go where no one has gone before.